Wow. I thought this was like totally for us, this small. I'd like to see, I mean, as you all well know, our keynote speaker is an amazing person. She is one of 1,000 women to have received the Nobel Peace Prize. And she was awarded the Martin Luther Jr. Peace Prize as well. She's a committed human rights activist working for peace and justice for 30 plus years. She's little, but she packs it. She has a huge list of accomplishments. She was the runner on the Green Party ticket as candidate for California Senator. Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones. She exposed the sweatshops of Nike. She led a delegation of Iraqi women to Washington to speak out against the war of Iraq. The women then toured the US against the war, telling their stories all over the US. She organized the Gaza Freedom March. She opposed AIPAC and partaking in the Freedom Flotillas. While protesting in Cairo, she was arrested during the Egypt uprising. She is determined to keep drones out of the spying hands of the CIA. Her active, creative, and witty disruptions have been so appreciated, and her special, diplomatic, and courageous approach to audiences of the misguided and conventional. Did you know that she was inspired? She has been an inspired person for actions here in our own community. Political caroling, sending 3 local activists to Washington, D.C., hosting Iman, tax day demonstrations, skirts up for Cheney, pink slip demonstrations, and wailing at the recruiting center office in Medford are just to name a few. When CodePink is in action, everyone knows because they cannot be missed. I am so honored, we are so honored to have you. Please, Medea, co-founder of CodePink and Global Exchange, please come up and let me present you. To present the Marjorie Maybury Kellogg National Peacemaker Award to Medea Benjamin, co-founder of Global Exchange and CodePink, Women for Peace, an advocate of peace and justice for more than 3 decades. In recent years, she has emerged as one of the most effective activists on the international stage. Her courage, her creativity, and her sheer joyous effrontery toward the powers and principalities of the world inspire us all. Presented at the Celebrate Peace 2012 Awards Dinner, Friday, October 19th, 2012. Thank you so much.
Well, I am so honored and humbled to be with this group of people here, to hear the kind of work that Nancy and Mark have done to save so many homes, to hear what Gina has done to celebrate diversity and allow this community to show their appreciation for diversity. And Lucy and Jim, who I've known for many years, in fact we were together in the 80s in Central America. It's a great honor to be honored along with so many wonderful people. I must correct the introduction. Me and the other 999 women who were nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize never received that. It was actually, like this year, Barack Obama that received that Peace Prize last year. And Go figure. Now you got the EU, go figure. So it is really an honor, and as Herb said, I just got back from Pakistan, and listening to Jim talk about Central America, I try to equate it with what I just experienced in Pakistan. I was mentioning during the dinner to him how in Pakistan, unlike so many places I've been around the world, there are a lot of people in Pakistan who really don't differentiate between the American people and the American government. A lot of people think we are one and the same. And, you know, frankly, they've got good reason to think that. Because they think that when our drone Hellfire missiles are killing women and children, that's what the American people want. And if we don't get up and say that's not what we want, of course they're going to believe that we are what our government is. And so it was very, very difficult to go to Pakistan. It's a very tough place. You know, 3 out of 4 Pakistanis think the United States is its enemy. And taking a group of 34 people, when we got into Islamabad, I was amazed we got our visas, I was amazed we landed there, and I looked around at this group of amazing Americans and I said, raise your hand if somebody in your family or a loved one pleaded with you not to come on this trip. And every hand went up in the room. And I looked around and I said, you know, you give me courage, the fact that you all came here. And not only that, we were planning to go on a peace march into Waziristan, place where the Taliban is very strong, the place where US drone strikes are killing so many people. And the ambassador, the US ambassador in Islamabad, asked to meet with us. And we met with him, and he said, I must say, we really don't think you should go there. That there are lots of people who hate Americans there. And in my capacity, I'm telling you, you shouldn't go. And we talked to the group, and everybody in the group said, we still want to go. Well, 2 days later, right before we were getting ready to go on this caravan, the embassy called, and they said, we have to talk with you urgently. And they sent their security person. And the security person sat down with me and he said, we have new, credible evidence that there are militants who want to attack you. And I must tell you, I don't think you should go. So we sat down with the group and we all talked about it. And I said to the group, just the fact that you've come to Islamabad, just the fact that we have had meetings so far with women's groups, with human rights organizations, with different political parties, and we have had a chance already to meet with drone strike victims. We have accomplished our goal. If you feel that you don't want to go on this march, that is totally understandable, totally fine. Of the 34 people, 33 of us went. And you talk about citizen diplomacy, you talk about doing the things our government won't do. Every one of those people, and that was ranging in age from 22 years old into their 80s, were people who felt that it was their responsibility as US citizens to show that we care about the lives of Pakistanis. And it was an extraordinary experience, because when we got to the border of the tribal areas, we were not able to get as far as we wanted because the government stopped us, but we did get into the tribal areas, we did meet with drone strike victims, we did have a rally there, and we saw people who had never seen Americans before. In fact, we were in a place where since 9/11, no Americans have ventured there. And to be surrounded by thousands of people and have them chanting, "Welcome, Americans, welcome, Americans, we want peace, we want peace." There was not a dry eye among those of us in the delegation. And there was a Pashtun man who got up in one of our meetings and he put his hand on his heart and he said, "If you have come here to win the hearts and minds of the Pakistani people, you have won mine." And there was a woman who came up and said, "You have done more than the hundreds of millions of dollars that your government throws at us, pretending that it's for development aid." That the Pakistani people needed to see that there are Americans who care about their lives. And it's a very... So I think that this issue of citizen diplomacy is absolutely essential. And I wrote this book about drone warfare because I've been witnessing what's happening since 9/11. Raise your hand if you thought it was awful for the US to invade Iraq and that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Okay, raise your hand if you thought it was good to invade Iraq. All right. Raise your hand if you think that the occupation of Afghanistan does not make any sense and that our troops should come home. Raise your hand if you think we should continue to stay in Afghanistan. Well, guess what? On both of those issues, we now represent the majority of American people. It took a long time to get to this point. And in the case of Afghanistan, it's very important because it's hard for people to say a war is not worth fighting when you still have 68,000 soldiers there and you still have soldiers dying there. Very hard for the majority of Americans to say that. And now it is the majority of Americans who say that it's not a war worth fighting. That's pretty extraordinary. In fact, you would never know those were the polls when you listen to the two candidates in the mainstream parties talking, because they seem to want to outdo each other in terms of making war. But the American people are very tired of war. The American people know that these were misadventures. They know that we can't afford these wars. Extraordinary costs of these wars, trillions of dollars we are talking about. The money that we spend directly on the wars is just one portion of it. You know that the war in Vietnam we are still paying for now in terms of all of the health needs of the Vietnam veterans. And I know there are a number of Veterans for Peace here in this room, and I want to give a shout out to you because you're really... The war in Afghanistan is something the US economy can no longer afford. And so the powers that be in this country have recognized that there is a war weariness. And that's where the drones come in. The drones come in as a way to make war on the cheap. The drones come in as an alternative to having soldiers that are risking their lives, that are costing us $1 million per soldier in the case of Afghanistan. The drones are what somebody in the State Department, and you know the State Department is supposed to be the diplomatic arm of our government, called a miracle weapon. A miracle weapon. And you might know the name of John Brennan, who is the counterterrorism chief of President Obama, somebody I actually got to confront directly. And he called the drones precise, ethical, just, and wise. Imagine these drones are wise. And that's the way they've been sold to the American people. And so when you see a poll that's asked the American people, do you support the use of using drones, again, to kill militant suspects? Now what's a suspect?
Anybody.
Anybody, yeah. I mean, a suspect is somebody who's never been convicted of anything. The 82% of the American people said yes. 82% of Americans. That included the majority of Republicans, it included a majority of Democrats, and it included a majority of people who call themselves liberal Democrats. So when the Pakistani people think that we approve of our government's policies, they have good reason if they look at a poll like that. And by the way, the same poll that was asked of people around the world showed the absolute opposite. Showed 9 out of 10 people in countries from US allies like Jordan to Greece to Egypt saying it was barbaric to be using these remote control weapons. Now, when 9/11 happened, there were maybe 50 drones in the Pentagon arsenal. Today, there are about 10,000 of these. They come in all shapes and sizes. A drone can look exactly like a dragonfly or a hummingbird. The majority of drones that are being used today are small ones that can be put in a soldier's backpack and launched individually. These are surveillance drones. And then there are the larger drones the size of a small airplane called the Predator and the Reaper drones. Those are the ones that are the lethal drones. And then there's big drones like one called the Global Hawk that is the size of a commercial airplane. And as Leon Panetta, Secretary of Defense, said, this is the only game in town. The US is producing more and more of these drones. Every single weapons manufacturer is taking a part of this business right now because it is a huge business. It's projected in the next 10 years the Pentagon will be spending $40 billion on drones alone. And we have been using these drones in Iraq. And in fact, when we left Iraq, the majority of US troops, the Iraqi people thought that the drones would be leaving as well. Well, lo and behold, it's now the State Department that has a fleet of drones to protect that huge embassy the size of a Vatican that we left behind in Baghdad. And we also took some of those drones from Iraq across the border into Turkey, where they're being used to provide information to the Turkish government in its conflict with the Kurds. And so we are involved in another conflict in that part of the world that we shouldn't be in. The drones are still being used in Afghanistan. In fact, drones were just used last week and killed 3 innocent young people. Drones are being used in Libya. In fact, they were used as part of the air cover. And one of the very disturbing things about the use of drones in Libya is that the Obama administration said because we were using drones, no US lives were at risk. And so there was absolutely no reason to involve Congress in this. That this was not a war. War Powers Act did not have anything to do with it. So one of the biggest problems with these drones is it makes it a lot easier to get involved in wars. It has already set a terrible precedent that will go on for the future administrations about totally bypassing the legislative branch when it comes to decisions about getting involved in armed conflicts. The US is using drones in Pakistan, in Yemen, Somalia. Drones have been used in the Philippines. And there are US drone bases that are being built now in various countries of the Middle East that go from Oman to Qatar, Kuwait, even Saudi Arabia. And you might know that one of the reasons Osama bin Laden said he attacked us on 9/11 was because we had bases in the holy places in Saudi Arabia. And George Bush quietly closed down those bases, and now they're being reopened as drone bases. And then there are drone bases that are dotting Africa. They're in the islands in the Seychelles, the tiny African nation of Djibouti, but also in Ethiopia, Burundi, Uganda. They are talking about bringing drones back to Libya now after the killing of the ambassador there. And the CIA just this week has asked for more drones because they say that they need to use them in North Africa. They're worried about the instability in Libya. They're worried about the instability in Mali. And so they are asking for more drones. Now, for anybody who doesn't know how these drones are operated, they're operated by pilots who are based here in the United States. And so you have this very surreal science fiction kind of thing that people are killing people thousands of miles away in countries they know nothing about, have never been to the battlefield, don't know the language, don't know the culture, don't know the customs. And they have 2 ways that they can kill people. One is a kill list. It's actually called a personality strike because you're going after an individual person. And excuse me for looking for the guys with beards here, but that tends to be one of the characteristics. So, that guy over there, another guy I see over here, yeah, a couple of you. This kill list is determined by President Obama. I mean, this is a Nobel Peace Prize winner, a constitutional lawyer, who every week, what day is today? Friday, we're okay today. It's on Tuesdays, called Terror Tuesdays, where he gets his advisors into the White House and they take nominations for who is going to be on the kill list. And they look through profiles that have people's pictures. They say they resemble baseball cards. And they put people on these kill lists. So you have a kill list is one way, and the other is called a signature strike. And the signature strike is based on suspicious behavior. So imagine these drone pilots thousands of miles away, again not knowing the culture of the people, who see a gathering of folks that have beards, and maybe have turbans, and maybe carrying guns, which can represent a lot of people in places like northern Pakistan. And that looks like a suspicious group. For example, on March 17th of 2011, when there was a traditional gathering of tribal leaders called a jirga, where they come together to talk about community problems, well, this looked to the pilots in the United States as a meeting of Taliban up to no good. They sent in the drone strikes, killed over 40 of the leaders of that community. You can imagine the kind of hatred, the kind of blowback that happens after something like that. In fact, it's said that the drones are the best recruiting tool for Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. That it used to be Guantanamo under the Bush administration. And the Obama administration, campaigned on closing Guantanamo. Found out it was quite difficult to close Guantanamo. And decided that it was just easier to kill people. And so the drone strikes under the Obama administration have gone up from 46 under Bush to now several hundred of them, over 300 under the Obama administration. And so many people under the Bush administration who were part of a very justified outrage against Guantanamo, indefinite detention, torture, extraordinary rendition, are now silent because this is being done by a Democratic administration. And that is a terrible indictment of our peace movement, which in large part, with exceptions like this group here, have faded away when Obama came into office. And yet you look at a place like Pakistan, and the drone strikes just went off the charts. In fact, it got so bad in 2010 that there were drone strikes every 4 days in Pakistan. How many people have been killed? Well, that's a good question. Wish we knew the answer, but certainly our government is not going to tell us that. And there are a number of groups who are trying to get these statistics from local people. The best one is done by a group in England called the Bureau for Investigative Journalism. And they estimate that between 2,500 and 3,200, that's 3,200 people, in Pakistan alone have been killed by these drone strikes. Well, there's a big question of, are they militants or are they civilians? Well, the Obama administration admitted that they say that any male of military age that is in the areas where we are using these drones is a militant. So how are you to know if somebody we killed was actually an active member of Al-Qaeda or an active member of the Taliban trying to do something to kill Americans? We have no idea. There was a study done by Stanford University and NYU law schools called Living Under Drones,